Under the Skin. Okay, Under the Skin, 2013 movie starring Scarlett Johansson. What is there to say about this movie? There's actually a lot to say about this movie. This is actually my sixth attempt of trying to review this movie, and very difficult to review this movie. Lots to deconstruct here, lots to think about. And the funny thing about this movie is that there's lots to think about and lots to deconstruct, and big complaint people have with this movie is that nothing happens and that it's incredibly minimalistic. And it's kind of frustrating to me to go on the IMDb message boards and look at these messages, and they're usually, especially with these types of movies, this polarizing movie which seems to get under people's skin, that's wink wink, is that there's two groups. There's this group in my left hand, which they just think it's trash. They say it's artsy fartsy trash, the arts farts. And then there's this other group which combats with this group, and this group says this group just doesn't get it. And my right hand is saying that my left hand, it just didn't get the movie, and that's why it doesn't like it. And both groups, I think, are in the wrong. I prefer to take the middle position, and to say that a movie is trash is a big statement to make, and I don't really agree with it. I think a lot of the people who say that's trash, they just didn't enjoy the movie, and they just didn't get anything out of the movie. It doesn't mean that they didn't get it, as this group is trying to say. They could they could have gotten it. They could have gotten the meaning. They could have gotten exactly what the movie was supposed to be doing. They just didn't like how it was executed, or they just weren't interested in it. They just weren't entertained by it. But just not being entertained by something doesn't mean that it's trash and that it can't entertain other people. And if the purpose of a movie is to entertain everybody, well, I don't think anyone has made a good movie then, because there's always going to be people who are not entertained by it or just don't like it. And there's lots of small groups with movies made just for these small groups. And then there's even bad movies could be entertaining for a lot of people. And, well, this is definitely not a bad movie. It's not produced bad, it's not directed bad, it's not acted bad. It's not bad in that sense. The only thing that's bad at is entertaining a large group of people. And that's not what it was sent out to do. But saying that that group of people didn't get it is just pretentious and wrong, in my opinion. And like I said, the reason why people don't like this movie, I believe, is because it's very, very minimalistic. There's lots of uninterrupted shots where the camera doesn't move, and you just are watching the character walk along a path at a distance. And there's lots of shots like these, and lots of things are repeated in the movie as well. And people are saying, what's the point? Why does this scene have to go on for so long? I just wanted to say a little bit about what this movie reminded me of. And this movie reminded me of a lot of other different movies, almost to a fault. It reminded me of all these other different movies, because that kind of pulls it back from being its own thing. But I think in the end, it did succeed in becoming its own movie, even though it does seem to play homage to or borrow from a number of other movies. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is The Man Who Fell to Earth, starring David Bowie as an alien. And both movies are very similar. They both involve two aliens. One's a man, one's a woman, who are pretty much trying to adapt within human society. And as one of the reviewers on 366 Weird Movies puts it, The Man Who Fell to Earth and Under the Skin, which has been referred to as The Woman Who Fell to Earth. While The Man Who Fell to Earth is about a man feeling lonely because he became human, all too human. He was brought down to our level and our depravity, and he did not like it. Under the Skin is about a woman, alien, who is lonely because she cannot become human, and she doesn't understand humanity, and she's actually kind of an enemy of humanity because she's killing men for food, apparently, according to people who have read the book. I guess pretty much any minimalistic movie it shares a resemblance to, such as some films by Werner Herzog, which are very minimalistic. Valhalla Rising is a very minimalistic movie. Even 2001: A Space Odyssey, which it seems to reference to in its opening shot of space and space things. And it also seems to be... another movie it reminded me of was Beyond the Black Rainbow, which I think they're very similar in that they're kind of a homage to these other movies. I don't think either movie steals, per se, from 2001: Space Odyssey or The Man Who Fell to Earth, but they're rather a homage to that kind of movie and that movie-making style of the 70s, really. Even 2001 was late 60s, but it has very similar style. So one thing that I noted was the wonderful soundscape, and it is quite a wonderful soundscape. It's first introduced in the opening shot of these images from space, and you hear lots of violins, and it's very noisy and chaotic, and it definitely evokes a feeling of loneliness, which is really what this movie is all about. And I think one of the reasons why there are such long shots of seemingly nothing, which people are complaining about, that go on forever, and all this repetition, is that this movie is really about being alone, and it's trying to really trying to emulate that with these shots of this woman alone, walking alone through these big, fast, open spaces. And it's also kind of about exploring the world through these alien eyes. And when you're looking at this image for so long that it doesn't seem to change very much, you kind of look at every single corner of the frame, and you kind of like appreciate the image and the beauty of the image, and very much like the images that Werner Herzog produces in his documentary. He holds them because he knows what images to hold. These images which the camera holds on and which are really there to give you this feeling of isolation, and for meditation. And also in Stalker and Solaris, there's two long scenes where in Stalker there's this long scene where they're just traveling to this new forbidden zone, I think it's called. And in Solaris, it's this long scene of this guy just driving, and it's supposed to look futuristic, but it just looks like Japan, which I'm pretty sure is where they shot it to make it look futuristic. And I always hear lots of complaints about these scenes, especially the one in Solaris, because it goes on for too long and there's not really much there. But both of these scenes, they seem to come before a transition into the unknown, and I think they're really there for meditation. And I think that's exactly what Under the Skin is trying to do with this emptiness, this void. You meditate on it, and obviously, since there's not much there except our main character, you're meditating basically on their feeling of loneliness. On that note, the movie really strives to create this foreign environment. I mean, we have this alien here, and she's played by an American actress with an American accent, and she's surrounded by all these Scottish people. And obviously, if you're a part of the American audience and you haven't been to Scotland, it already enhances the foreignness of it all, even though there are some bits of familiarity in there, such as one of the opening scenes in a mall, which looks like any other mall in the world, which we're familiar with, but this alien might not be so familiar with this kind of consumership and this chaotic energy that you would see in a mall and such. And that definitely contrasts with a lot of the peacefulness you see later in the movie with these landscapes, and of course contrasting with the very chaotic end of the movie and very violent end of the movie, which I'm not really going to discuss here because I don't want to be too spoilery. So basically, I didn't really even talk about what the movie's about. What this movie is about, it's an alien. She steals a dead woman's clothes, which there's speculation that that woman that she steals the clothes from might have been another alien. And basically, she goes around seducing men, and she brings them to this all black room. Everything's black, and she strips for them, and she walks backwards, and she leads them into this kind of like pit where they are consumed. And that actually reminded me a lot of Deathbed, the movie Deathbed, a low budget gem, in that the scene of the consumption. That's not really important, that's just something it reminded me. Eventually, she I can go into more stuff, especially the scene where she seduces and traps a disabled man and this character in a motorcycle jacket. But I really don't want to go too much into the plot and all that finer details because there's really not a lot there. So if you haven't seen it already, you should just see it for yourself and kind of take it in. But the way it ends, I'm not going to spoil the ending either, but pretty much she makes this transition into becoming more human when she meets a man who doesn't seem to be immediately seduced by her flirtations, and I think she's intrigued by that. And originally, I thought this was a criticism on these men who were so quick to pretty much entering into this one-night stand with her, and in which they would have no consequence of, except of course in reality they're consumed. But really, when you think of it, you can't really blame the disabled man for being enticed by her offering of being touched by her, him being touched by her. And really what I think intrigues her about this man, this fourth man, is that he's also pretty much a loner. And he lives alone, he does everything alone, and I think she was able to relate to that. And in the end, I'm not sure why, but she goes into a forest and bad stuff happens. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And it's a very memorable ending. Yeah. And I think the ending really is something that makes the wait, if you can call it that, of the rest of the film worthwhile, because it's really something that sticks with you. That's not to say that there's not a lot of things in this movie that will stick with you. There's actually, there's a scene, a disturbing scene involving a baby. That's another scene that really sticks out and really strikes home the theme of the movie, which is loneliness. Could be one theme, or just human nature is another theme, and they're both encompassed in that disturbing scene in the first third of the movie. Anyways, I couldn't go on about this, but I think I'm gonna leave it at that. Have a nice life. And another thing, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the nude scene, and I think the reason why a lot of people actually watch this movie is because they knew that it was Scarlett Johansson's first nude. And there's a couple of nude scenes, and really not all of them are that necessary, especially the very first one. I feel like the first one was pretty much just the director saying, here's your nude scene. Now, if you don't, you can leave if you don't like the movie. And because it's just baffling, it doesn't make sense. She's nude and she's taking clothing off of another person who people speculate is actually another alien who was able to feel emotions like she did and was therefore defective. But it doesn't really make sense for her to take clothes off another woman, even alien or human or whatever she was, when clothes are readily available. I mean, this man in the the motorcyclist, whatever you call them, he's bringing her this woman to take her clothes when really he could just give her clothes. I don't understand why they had to do that. But anyways, that's just a little tidbit there. Yeah. But like I said, not all of the nude scenes were unnecessary. Um, the scene where she's looking at herself in the mirror is very similar to the scene where David Bowie is looking at his human form in the mirror. And I think both of those scenes were essential to each of their respective movies. But I'm just saying the very first scene was just kind of like, if this is what you came for, here it is. Now it's gonna get a little weird. So, yeah, goodbye.